Hello, welcome. Lovely to see you all. Let's get officially started. It's absolutely awesome to have so many people here. I wasn't expecting so many, so brilliant to see you all from all over the place. Why don't we, while everybody's just gathering, everybody unmute yourselves and let's, on the count of three, sing out, "Where in the world are you?" On the count of three, where in the world are you? 1, 2, 3, go.
Yorkshire.
Northern
Jordan. USA.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for playing along with that. And as we get started, I have a question for you. To say in the chat, what would you like to happen in this session? Please, I'll just drop the question in the chat. What you would like to happen in the session. Please add your comments to the chat. Hello, Ray, you've made it onto a different machine. Sue, Colin, excellent to see you all. Please say in the chat what you would like to happen in this session. So we've got an interesting mix of people. Some people are people I know well and have seen on many events over the years. Some people are new. Some people are currently doing clean language training. Some people are curious. Lots and lots of interesting things people would like, I imagine. Connection and learning, light bulb moments to learn, introduction to clean language. We're definitely going there. Experience a full clean language conversation. That's going to be an interesting one. Let's see what we come up with there. New tools, new tips, business setting for clean language, curiosity, delight. Lovely. The absolute basics of clean language. So there's lots and lots of things that people would like, and open for inspiration. Katazynia? Is that anywhere near it?
Yes. Katarzyna.
Excellent. Sorry for mangling your name. Welcome. So we've got some things that everyone would like, and it's great to see all of those things. We're going to get started now. We've set 90 minutes for today's session. We hope that everybody can stay for all of the 90 minutes. We appreciate you may not be able to, but if you can, please do. There are some slides that go along with this session if you're interested. I'll only display the slide when we're doing things like providing information that's important for activities. But if you would like to, please feel free to follow along on the link I'm about to share in the chat. There's some Google Slides there. Things to say at the very beginning. This session is going to include lots of activities. Do please feel free to decline the activities. You know, I appreciate some people may have childcare or things they've got to do in the background, but you will get the absolute best from this session if you join in the small group conversations, in particular, the ones where we're asking you to practice the things that we're talking about. Clean language is particularly one of those things where if you talk about it, you get nothing like the experience that you actually get when you do it, when you ask the questions and when you are asked the questions. Some of the people who are just learning clean language for the first time, has that been your experience? I'm seeing a couple of nods.
I have to
Stephanie,
say,
Matt.
it was suggested that I join your group, but I really don't know what you do. Sorry.
Excellent. Oh, that's
Sorry.
even better.
Now, I'm completely in the dark. So
I know that I saw an email saying that you'd been invited, but I'm afraid I've forgotten who it was that invited you.
Frances Gallahan.
Who is on the call?
Yeah.
Excellent. You do know each other.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. We work
Frances,
together and we're friends.
You do likely. Okay, you're friends. Good. So that was a good recommendation, Lynn. She's not messing with you here. This is a good thing.
It is.
So we'll come to what clean language is in just a few moments. Other things that we need to say at the very beginning. The obvious warning, I think by signing up, you agreed to be recorded. It's really, really important that this is recorded because there are a lot of people even more people than signed up for this session. There are a lot of people who said they can't come. Please let me have the recording. So we are recording. Thank you for agreeing to that. Is there anything else, Steve, that I should have said at the beginning?
Only that if you can't do the join-in, let us know before we do breakout rooms so that the buddy that you were going to go with isn't left alone. That would be kind. That's the only thing I would say. And yeah, everything's voluntary. No clean language experience needed. In fact, if we weren't talking about mentioning clean language every 3rd second, you may not even know it's clean language by the end of it, because it's just kind of everyday stuff, sort of, with a twist.
So the inspiration for this session came from a friend of ours, Hisham, who learned from me a good number of years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. He's a consultant pediatrician, so he's a senior doctor looking after children, and he's also involved in the management of 2 hospital trusts in the UK. And we asked him to talk about how he uses clean language. And he said that it helped to make his sessions clear, crisp, and concise. And that abbreviates the consultation. He would often only have 7 minutes to have a conversation with his child patient and their parents. And when we asked more about what was it that he did that made the difference, he said he changed one question. He does, of course, use other clean language questions. Clean language, at its simplest, is a questioning technique. There's a lot more to it than that. But he found this one question especially useful. And that's the question that we're going to explore today. And this clean language and this question are not just used in healthcare. They're used in a whole bunch of different contexts. We gave a version of this talk, for example, recently to a bunch of civil servants, government employees in the UK, most of them working in the technical side, introducing computer digital stuff into UK government. We did a talk for agile coaches, again, quite technical people in Newcastle, which is about an hour away from where Steve and I live in the north of England. Steve, can you wave? Because I haven't actually said the people running this call are myself, Judy, and Steve, who can wave over there. Steve McCann is my husband and also my business partner. He's been involved in teaching clean language and associated skills in some very interesting places, including the European Parliament and the European Commission, where one of the students at the European Commission said, I've been on loads of leadership training. This was by far the best I've ever had. So there's a big brownie point for Steve there.
That's a big, oh, blimey, God, I have to be good now, aren't I? That's something. There's lots of good stuff out there. This is only one small part of it. One thing I would say is that we would like to introduce this, and we'll give you that question very shortly, as something that goes alongside your existing skill sets and what you know. I think we are at our best when we're helping, already great, good, competent, smart people leverage what they already know as part of their questioning set and how it works. So do we start giving, or do I talk about the do's and don'ts of you, the when you would want to use this or not use it, or is that later?
Not yet.
Not later. Okay.
Later. Before we go there, there's a little piece of homework that I need everybody to do before we dive into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do this evening for us, lunchtime for some people, in this session. So I have a question for you to think about initially in the privacy of your own brain, and please make a note if you've got a bit of paper or something. In order to participate in one of the activities in a few moments, you're going to need 2 answers to this question. What gets in the way of great communication at work? And ideally make that your work rather than just general. So what gets in the way of great communication at your work? Make a private note. And you will be sharing these with somebody else in a small group later. So please say something that you are willing to have a little conversation about. Everyone will need a couple of things that get in the way. If you don't ever have any issues with communication in your work, then feel free to make something up.
Oh, raise your hand now so we can bow down at your feet. That would.
Gianpaolo, you're finding that one tricky to come up with anything?
No, I was just laughing at the idea that someone would have had zero problems in communication. No, I already jotted down 2 and working on a
Excellent.
3rd.
Yeah, I've just written down other people. Oh no, you can't do that one. No, no.
And Tobis, you've just joined. Hello. Please feel free to unmute yourself and say hello. We're just talking about what gets in the way of great communication at work. Please jot a couple of things down. We'll be using these answers in a breakout activity in just a few moments.
Okay. Hi everyone. Sorry I'm late. It's nice to be here.
You're very welcome.
You're very welcome. Thanks for coming. Let's move on then. Has everybody got... Oh, let's do it like this. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to show by number of fingers how many you've got written down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many things? 1, 2, 3, go. Everybody got something written down? Oh, Liz, you raised your hand. Is that the magic of the automated thingamy?
Mm.
That's rather impressive, isn't it? How it does that nowadays. Excellent. So that's great. Everybody's got something to work with, and we will come back to those in just a moment. Okay. Next thing then. What I'd like you to do in the next breakout is not to talk about those things. Definitely don't talk about those things. What I'd like you to do in the next breakout is to compare and contrast 2 questions. I'm showing these questions on the screen behind me. If you can't read that, one of the ways you can read it is to click the blue button at the top right of my little box. And one of the options there is pin, and that will make me big until you turn it off. Steve, could you copy paste the 2 questions from the slide into the chat? That would be great.
Yes, I can. Now, in the past, Judy has made me a co-host, and I used to pin her for everybody, and she didn't like it. So she's cut off my claws. She won't let me pin her this time. I've been prevented from playing my.
Well, you are still
game.
co-host, but yes. Please don't. I don't want to be spotlit for everybody because it means I can't see you. So do please feel free to pin me. I'll also make Sharon a co-host just in case our internet goes completely pear-shaped. Thanks, Sharon. So in a moment, I'm going to drop you into breakout rooms. The invitation is to spend 5 minutes talking about what's the difference and what's the similarity. Most importantly, what's the difference between these 2 questions? How can I help? Versus, and when, problem or obstacle, what would you like to happen? Let me just explain what I mean by and when, problem or obstacle, what would you like to happen? Steve, Steve, have you got a problem?
Yes.
What's your problem?
My problem is my co-host skills have been are not working.
And when your co-host skills are not working, what would you like to happen?
I'd like to be able to pin you for everybody just for giggles.
Thank you. So we'll be playing with that question a little later on. But for now, just have a chat in your group of 3 people about what's different and what's similar between these two questions.
It might be, how can I help you? You'd probably more likely to say, how can I help you, or rather than how can I help? But it's just that, and when in their words what the problem is, what would you like to happen?
And when I summon you back, we'll hear from a few of the groups some of the highlights of your discussions.
And that second question, that is the one we're going to play with today, and some of the impacts and effects that it can have. But it'd be great if you could consider that now in active little groups.
Here we go. Steve, don't join unless you want to. We've got 3s, so we've got 7. We've got 7 3s. Including you, so there are 20 participants. Yeah.
Oh no.
Hello.
Hello. I was trying to clear there was a big sign that came
Yeah.
up that I had and I was trying to get rid of the box, and I think I just jumped a ship there. Oh no.
It
That's
happens to one person at least on every call, don't we?
I win.
Gianpaolo, it's you.
I got the prize.
Yeah, what kind of
Oh,
win?
no.
Yeah. Welcome back. How did that go? Did you manage to have a conversation in there?
We did.
Okay.
I don't know if you want me to share here, but
No, that's coming. I just
yeah,
wanted to have the confidence of checking in to know that
no, it was productive.
Something productive and interesting happened in here, because the next pieces will be doing a 3-4 minute debrief on what kind of thing, because we know what we think, but anyway, it all will become revealed. All will be revealed. We all whoosh back in. I'm on the small screen. I've got you pinned, Judy, just to, because it was the limit of my powers. It's all I could do was to pin you on my screen. So here we are. So okay, I'm going to ask some questions. Who should I give? Carolyn. Are you Carolyn? I'm going to come to you first. I just say that so that you won't be shocked in a moment. The thing I'm going to ask you and everybody here is, what kind of things did you notice? What implications, inferences, anything you like on the differences and similarities between those questions and where they might take you. Carolyn, anything you can start us off with just to get the ball rolling?
We pretty much had agreement. What I noticed was I held back because I tend to go forward too soon. And I really enjoyed hearing the response of one of the other people.
Oh, whose response did you most enjoy? Bearing in mind, you're going to pass the talking ball to that person right now.
Oh, okay. Tops. And I agreed with what she was saying, and I didn't have to be the one to say it.
Thank you. Who was that? Sorry.
Tubbs.
Tubbs.
Yep.
We'd love to hear from you, Tubbs. What did you say? And Tubbs, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
What thoughts did you have in the breakout group there that Carolyn appreciated so much? We'd love to hear.
Can I just switch? I'm going to switch networks, and then when I come back, I think I'll be clearer, and then I'll answer the question.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much. And now we've got started. And who else had something? I was going to say something different from that, but we don't know yet. We're on tenterhooks. Let me open the floor and ask for someone to come forward and share an insight. Hey, Francis, thank you.
You're welcome. What I thought was interesting is we're all coaches, and we give more attention to the psychological side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so this question was really appropriate because it puts the responsibility on that person to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it puts responsibility is quite a significant word, isn't it? the
Mhm,
responsibility to go deeper.
mhm.
Responsibility goes deeper. Who has something similar or different to that? Either a build or a new building?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sue,
Yes.
thank you.
Well, again, I'm a therapist, but I had that. My thought was not so much about responsibility, but that how can I help you is disempowering to my client. Whereas when I say to them, with this problem, what would you like to have happen, is empowering them to find their own solution.
Thank you.
So I saw it as empowering rather than passing a responsibility over.
Good
I think
word.
that's a significant element of it, whether it's an invitation or a requirement. It's yeah, we got something in that trajectory. Did I hear another voice there? Did I accidentally talk over somebody?
I just said, yeah, that's a much more positive and uplifting word, I think. Empowering them.
And who has something similar or indeed different to that?
This is Matt. I've got something different.
Thank you.
The question, how can I help, seems to invite more discussion about the problem, which almost seems to dig deeper into a hole. I shared this metaphor in our session too. The what would you like to happen seems to invite more remedies, solutions, goals, objectives, which seems to like, let's dig ourselves out of the hole.
Yeah, to dig ourselves out of the hole. Preconception of holes and remedy and help there. Yeah, that's interesting to play with that, test the edges of that, and see where we go. Oh, Thobes, how's your network going, Thobes? Hey, if it's difficult to, I heard you perfectly fine last time, by the way. Are you able to talk?
Yes, I am. I couldn't hear you guys. You were frozen on my screen. But I'm on a better one now. Yeah. What I found, I think what I found interesting about the discussion was what it did for my own mind. Like it felt lighter to ask the second question, less burdensome, to go with the second question than with the first. And one of the things we discussed was that walking out of that conversation wouldn't have been draining for both parties, because it's an invitation to explore, to dream, to look at possibilities. And also it's one of the things Carolyn said was the person could say nothing. I just wanted to share that. I'm not looking for, I'm not looking to see anything differently. And that's, you save a lot of time because you could have just, yeah.
There's always going to be a context when there's a question, when, you know, so what we're assuming here is dialogue. And what we're knowing is that there will be a context. I actually think context is one of the great under-considered elements of conversation. But we'll come on to that in a moment. Gianpaolo, thank you.
One of the things we talked about was, or at least when I receive the question, how can I help? I think of something concrete, like an action to take. And when I receive the other question, it feels more abstract. It feels more reflective, more inviting of the imagination.
Yeah, indeed. And I think we've given you those questions in a vacuum, if you like, in isolation, and the context will change things. And I will argue at some point in this session that sometimes it's a great thing to put in the second question, and sometimes it might not be, which we'll link back to context and just start thinking about when would it be most useful. We've got some therapists here who will think for therapy. I'm not a therapist. I don't go for therapeutic context instantly as my go-to. I'm more into the world of work and getting on with stuff. And of course, we do this increasingly in the health service, where GPs are actually taught to say, how can I help you? And we're beginning a bit of a campaign to ask them to consider using a different question sometimes. Perhaps more of that in time to come, because I think it's going to be an interesting conversation that we have and the reasons behind it. Now, Annagale, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I was just going to be quite honest. Obviously, I know a little bit about clean language, but I obviously know kind of Heshlem as well. I I used the second question when I was coaching somebody today, and there was just a little bit of something in my mind, and obviously this is my issue, that felt that when I asked the question, it was saying, I don't have a plan, so I'm giving you the ball. I'm giving you you can tell me because I haven't got a plan. Do you know what I mean? I know I know that it was the right question to ask and it helped the person, but my habit, the habit that I have had obviously for many, many years of thinking, people are expecting you to have not the answers, but to have a plan. You know, obviously this is about letting the individual. I think it's letting the individual go on their journey and getting to what they kind of need without overfeeding them. When they don't need that banquet, they just need a small meal, and it's not about showing you're an expert. But that's just something I recognized in myself, that my mind was going, oh, how will this sound to them? Will they think, oh, do you not know? Do you not have a plan? I'm used to some people saying, here's what we're going to do today.
Every conversation is framed with a context and the position that you put yourself in and your interlocutor in terms of status, hierarchy, expectations, and needs. So this is not a one-size-fits-all. We have to consider the context in which it sets. And I will say there are times and places where I would not use that question. It is not my universal starting point. But we're going to suggest there are times and places when it's hugely disproportionately useful, and talk about why we think that's so. And many of the core reasons have come up today in terms of an invitation to other, in terms of moving away from, actually, perhaps, Annabelle, what you're suggesting, the reliance upon other for a plan. But underneath it all, for me, it's a starting point in which there is a content-based invitation to get the other person to feel listened to and understood. And there are times and places when that matters more than anything, even more than the funny dance of forced empathy that's designed to make you mates before you start talking about stuff. Actually, people love being listened to and understood. Okay, maybe not everybody all the time, but it's a core thing. Once you get the sense of being understood, empathy, connection, and other stuff follows much more easily. That's actually one of the main reasons why we're looking at moving along. So in terms of debrief, would anybody else like to be heard before we go on to the next session? Going once, going twice, and thank you all. Judy, back to you.
So we've had a little explore of the difference between those two questions in theory. Next up, I'd love you to have an experience of asking and being asked that second question. Is that okay with everybody? So here's the thing. You all had your two things that get in the way of great communication at work, at least two things on a bit of paper. We're going to be playing with those in this next breakout activity. I've put the instructions in the chat. Here's what you're going to do. The first person is going to read out one of their problems, one of the things that stop them. The questioner is going to repeat the person's words, and then they're going to ask, and when problem, what would you like to happen? And the game is to try and stick as close as possible to the words the other person has given you, which they've hopefully written down on a bit of paper. Listen to their answer, and then swap roles and go again the other way around. And the idea is to do this about 2 or 3 each. Does that make sense as an activity? Would anyone be willing to repeat back the instructions to me so that I check that I've given them in a reasonable format? I'm looking around to see if someone is willing to volunteer to just say what they heard.
Raymond's looking away, so he's caught my eye instantly by looking down there.
Well, my immediate question was, how much time do we have?
I was
Good
looking
question.
at about 6 minutes plus the countdown timer. I hope that will give you time to do each
plenty.
way, at least twice each.
How many people in the room?
There are going to be 2 people in the room.
Okay.
In pairs.
In pairs. Now there is
Francis has a question. Francis.
Yeah.
Not a question. I just can read this if you want me to read what you said about the question about the activity.
Yeah. Well, as long as you understand it.
As long as you understand it, then maybe I'm being overcautious. I think someone's just dropped off the call, so we're now on odd numbers. So one group is going to be a group of 3. You'll just have to divide the time between you, and I'm sure you'll be able to do that with aplomb. Is everybody?
The reason we're doing this is to experience it and notice what happens when they get your words exactly right, when they get them a bit wrong, and paraphrase if they do, and what happens. It's baby steps for a group of this capacity, experience, and knowledge, but go with it, see what happens. And I think 5 minutes will be fine, Judy.
Okay. And the people who are completely new to all of this, again, just go with it and discover what you discover.
Yeah.
Opening the rooms now.
I'm a 2. So it was really good. Yeah.
That's super interesting, isn't it? We don't even notice we're making some of these assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Super, and would have been so good to have on the recording, wouldn't it?
So assumptions like saying, when the person says defensiveness, the assumption that when you are defensiveness, when you have defensiveness, and actually it's not that way round, it's the other way round, or some other way round.
Mm-hmm.
Super interesting. Who had a similar or a different experience? I'm going to pounce on someone else. Karen, what about you?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. I think I got further in my thoughts than I expected to. My mum was just really good at helping me work out what assumptions I had that I was making. So yeah, that was really helpful. I don't feel I've explained myself really well. What I went in with is communication's not good when I feel rushed. And she asked me what I'd like to have happen. And obviously the answer was some really good questions to slow things down. But yeah, it was very useful.
So Man asked you those questions. Excellent. Well done. Steve, you were asking me a question off mic.
I'd love to find out what Michael, how'd it go for you?
Yeah, it was interesting. And I to be on the receiving end, it was not uncomfortable, unusual, because I'm usually delivering. I'm a coach, so I'm thinking carefully about the questions I ask, and I think carefully about the answers, but not in quite this structured way. So it's good to be on the receiving end for a change. And in posing the questions, Katarzyna and I are different nationalities. So before asking the question, or developing the question with a second, it was necessary for me just to confirm that I'd understood her first answer correctly. So there's a clarification there, which I think helps both sides, because certainly it gives me the understanding, and it, I think, helps the other side to be absolutely clear about what it is that they're talking about.
And that repeating back that we do in this activity can have value in its own right. when you hear your own words come back to you, or not, as the case may be, because you can then say, well, no, I didn't say that, I said that. So that repeat back thing has got an importance. So Michael, you were one of our completely new to clean people. Lynn, you were another. What was your experience of that activity?
Well, honestly, what struck me was how incomplete I was in stating my problem when I was trying to say, well, this is my problem, and Matt was listening to me. When he went to repeat it back to me, I thought, yeah, I remember now saying more than one thing, meaning one thing, but used 2 or 3 examples. And I thought that must have been very confusing. So not having been clear with what I was saying, like right now.
And what a lovely example of the thing that is actually what happens all the time, isn't it? We don't spend our lives carefully crafting our message. We say what comes first to mind.
Right. Yeah. And especially if you have a whole lot of things rolling around in there at one time, trying to get them all in the right order can take a minute. Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, that's a big deal that I think, I personally think that the default in the world is miscommunication, at least as much as communication. And, when I know what I meant and I know what I heard, what could possibly go wrong? Well, because you know what you meant and you know what you heard. You don't know what they heard and you know what they meant. It's that kind of thing. And this is an invitation inter alia everything else everybody's mentioned here. It is an invitation, an unspoken invitation for other people to work out and be able to articulate actually what they want, as opposed to the help they perceive they need in a contextually framed conversation that might have hierarchy and expectations in it. Now, there are times to use that and times not to use it, and your wisdom will tell you when that's a good idea and a bad idea. I've spoken about the health service when we're on we would like to, we're going to do an experiment with a lot of practitioners on what the difference is, and you'll hear more about this experiment shortly, between using the 2 questions and in which context and what actually happens. We have presuppositions, which is ironic really, because one of the things about Clean, David Grove, the late lamented David, he designed these to minimize your preconceptions. And when you minimize preconceptions and create a space in which your interlocutor can develop their own thoughts and feel heard, a small thing can make a big difference in the trajectory of the conversation. And that's actually why I've used Clean for a long time now in cross-cultural, cross-lingual conversations with peers, beneficiaries, government officials. It's that small change that can just move the dial towards creating understanding for the other person of what they're trying to say as much as what you're trying to hear. Judy.
Thank you. I have one more question for that debrief. What happened to your attention when you were asked the question? When you were asked the question, what happened to your attention?
First, I really tried to focus on what he was actually saying. My focus went just to his words.
Mm-hmm. Your focus went to his words, so the questioner's words.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone have a different experience?
What I noticed was it became very personalized, and the question was focused on the person answering.
Mm-hmm.
Really, what was important for them.
Question was focused on the person answering and what was important for them.
Yeah, it's very much so.
Which is great. And Susie?
I was going to say, I think it moved me from being in the problem to trying to figure out what the solution was.
So it moved you from being in the problem to try and figure out what the solution was.
Yeah.
That is the classic reason for asking this question. To move a person's attention away from the problem and towards what they would like instead. Doesn't always happen like that. It often happens like that.
The really brilliant one for me that happened recently is we're working with palliative care teams, people on the end of life, helping others on the end of life pathway. And what we're hearing back from our frontline workers in palliative care is just using this question has produced answers that are radically different from the pre-prepared, high cost, high demand end of life packages that are available. Actually, what people want, apart from that, quite regularly, is something quite different and unexpected. And when the opportunity to go down that unexpected route, and I do have examples, they're anonymous, so it's okay. I'll probably come on to those later. But be aware, it's not always incredibly expensive drugs and incredibly expensive this, that, and the other. It's actually something rather different. And the whole team are saying they're learning quick win stuff that's making people feel listened to and improving the quality of their end of life. So for me, that's just an example of how it works.
And when all of that, there's a quick bit that we need to put in at this point, which is what is clean language? We've been talking about it, and some people here have never come across it before. So clean language was created by a guy called David Grove, the late David Grove, mostly during the 2000s, the noughties. He was a psychotherapist, effectively, and also a hypnotist. And he created these questions to find out more about the metaphors that underpinned what people were thinking and spilled out in their language. And since then, clean language has grown and spread a very long way, because the questions themselves, these precision questions, can be asked about all sorts of things in all sorts of circumstances. They don't have to be asked about metaphor. They don't have to be asked about deep and meaningful stuff in psychotherapy. As you've heard us hint already, people are using the clean language questions to clarify and to find out more about what people mean in all sorts of situations. They're being used by software developers to find out what people want from the software. They're being used by managers to find out what the team members want and need. They're being asked in sales conversations. They're being asked in education. There is no requirement to be in a coaching conversation or a therapeutic conversation to use the clean language questions. I've also put on this slide a picture of the book that I co-authored with Wendy Sullivan 15 or so years ago, which was probably the first popular book on clean language. The previous ones had been very much in the therapeutic space. Since that book came out, a whole lot of other people have been experimenting with these questions and finding out what happens, because these questions have two special things about them. One is that they are designed to minimize the amount of the questioner's stuff that goes into the question. So you imagine in something like a research interview, you're supposed to not lead the witness. But what's been found is that actually when you analyze research questionnaires with a clean lens, you often discover there's a lot of assumptions that people didn't realize they were putting in. Just as Stephanie was saying a few moments ago, she didn't realize she made a big assumption that the problem was owned by the person mentioning the problem, effectively.
I think there are companies who are very, very aware that they are leading the witness.
Of course, there are companies who do lead the witness intentionally, but that's in a different circumstance. So an intention not to lead the witness is part of these questions. And the other part is using the other person's words in the question. Using the other person's words has all sorts of advantages. As we've heard, they help people to clarify, help people to take ownership, empower the person. And using their words will help them to feel heard. Some people will have read a book called Never Split the Difference by an ex-hostage negotiator called Chris Voss. He calls using the hostage taker's words the nearest thing the FBI had to a Jedi mind trick. Because when you use their words, they think you understand them. It makes a huge difference. So that's the short version of what is clean language. I could talk for hours about it. It's my absolute passion. And yeah, I get very excited about it. But does that make sense? What questions, particularly do the new people have about what I just said? Sue.
Yes. One of the problems I've came across, and I've never had an answer to this, is that you ask somebody a clean question and then they talk for 3 minutes. No one on the earth can remember what a 3-minute conversation, and if you repeat that back, your therapy session goes on for 6 hours. What do you pick out? Do you just pick out what you think are the key things in those and reflect those back?
I think I've got
they said and reflect it back.
I've got a blog post about this that I will share when I send around the recording.
Thank you.
But the short answer is ask about anything. Whatever was memorable for you is a perfectly legitimate thing to do.
Okay.
In therapy, there are particular things you'll probably want to ask about, and you'll have a structure in the back of your mind about how you'll ask those questions. There's a model called the Framework for Change that will help you to choose your question.
Right.
I would suggest, though, writing down the first few words they say, and in preference, ask about those words. Not the last word they say, but keep going back to the first words they say as a general principle. And go for the good stuff. As far as possible, go for things that sound happy, cheerful, things they want more of in their lives, not the problem, because that will help the conversation to stay on a lighter note, which certainly in business contexts makes everybody a whole lot more comfortable.
Thank you. That's a huge help.
I'm not a therapist, so it's not my role to do that kind of thing. There may be other rules.
Health warning here. Don't do therapy unless you're a qualified therapist. I have to say that out loud because this stuff can very, very quickly take people into very different personal places. We're talking business use here. We're not talking therapy, and we're not trained to deliver therapy.
I think it's still the thing though. You ask somebody a question and then they get an attack of verbal diarrhea, and what do you pick out of that?
Well, funnily enough, it depends. So if I think about Hesham, who Judy spoke about at the beginning, consultant pediatrician, he has found that he gets he's only got 7 minutes. It's never really enough. He has found that by using the starter question, and Judy has released a video in which Hesham is interviewed on this and talks about it, which I'm sure we can release to you, that he gets more stuff more quickly, which paradoxically is the opposite of what you say. And I do resonate with what you say. Context is everything. We don't sit in the therapist chair, so I'm not willing or qualified to speak about that. But in business and everyday use, my experience is not of unplugging the diarrhea machine, so to speak. It's different to that. And Hesham has a different experience too. Both experiences are possible.
Any other questions before we move on to the next bit? Annagale.
I was just going to say that with John Parlo, can't say, I'm not very good at pronunciation, but you know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying. He said several things, and I didn't pick up on the first things he said, but towards the end, I thought he described a really good metaphor, which was the meeting of minds, and I kind of felt. I was panicking. How am I going to pick something? How am I going to pick something? He's talking. I felt drawn to that because I felt it was just a really, it was like a flag saying, pick me and help me to understand what that means. And
I'd go with that,
also it was
Annika.
positive.
I'd
Yeah.
go with that. What Julie said about the
Yeah.
early words, that's a kind of rule of thumb if you're perhaps sitting down interviewing somebody. In free flow conversation, if something later in the conversation flags itself up to you, that's a good place to be.
It was positive. It was a positive wanting to have, and it felt like it might be quite important.
And bear in mind, if you use, okay, we're only talking about one question here. We're not talking really about the follow-ups, and there are several of them. It is highly likely that if you invite and enable people and create the space for which they can work out what they think and mean, that the quality of their insight and thinking is actually going to improve as they say stuff out loud. Now, I think Steve Jobs said it's not the customer's job to know what he or she wants. I just translate that into life. It's not, we don't always think it's our job to know what we think until we kind of think about it and test it by saying it out loud and judge, look at the reactions it gets. And that helps us to work things out. So that would argue that perhaps later in the conversation, you're getting more clarity. So, there are different ways of cutting it.
In a few moments, we're going to, again, break into breakout rooms, this time to talk about how you might use this in your work and how it might be useful. I want to just share a couple more resources. I've shared some in the chat. I want to just say out loud some of the ways that Clean can help and be useful in conversations of all kinds, including between colleagues, with customers, in education, in meetings, in families, all kinds of conversations, in interviews, specifically in recruitment, research, journalistic, whole bunch of different kinds of interview context. Clean can be useful, and in coaching conversations and therapy, where there are specific additional considerations. Steve and I are not teaching coaching or therapy, as Steve has said. We're in the business mode, but Clean can be useful here. And Clean can be useful in coaching and therapy, even if you don't do the whole thing. You can pick up a question like the one we've explored today and mix it in to whatever you do. You don't have to wait until you've done the whole ILM coaching course to ask a single Clean language question. It's allowed.
So no to therapy for sure from us, but we can pass you on to experts in that field who are clinically proven and have the right qualifications. Coaching, you're a good Clean coach. If anybody wanted to talk to you about it, I'm sure you spend some time on it.
Yeah, so I do coach using Clean extensively, but I'm not normally a coach trainer. So if people, and I do occasionally do supervision, that kind of thing. And I want to mention one more resource that I think will be interesting to people. The Better Conversations course is something that is relatively new out there, not designed by me, but designed by the Better Conversations Foundation, who have set themselves the mission of widening the use of Clean language, its most basic principles, particularly in large organizations. And they've created an enterprise grade training course, 6 one-hour sessions, highly scripted, with handbooks all written up, that people like yourselves, if you want to, can simply pick up and deliver, so that the people you work with can just experience the best bits of Clean right there, right then.
Now, you all think this is the sales pitch, don't you? All right, this is what it's all about. It's Creative Commons, guys. It's free. We want the world to get this stuff. We want higher quality of understanding in conversations. Our passion is to put this into the healthcare service as much as possible and elsewhere in the world, and also government. We're looking for people who want to take the benefits of Clean language and what they already have into others, and there's this well-researched, indexed, scripted, referenced training resource that is free to use. That's the sale. Now, the ways into learning it, there are ways in, and that's what we'd like to talk to you about. There's the open course attendance, and then there's via a paid for service that Judy and I will offer. There you are, that is for sale, where we guide you on how to use it. But the choice is yours. And we're looking for people who want to go in, learn that, join the community and make money out of it and do good with it. I've stopped.
Okay, let's move on to the next breakout activity. How might this be useful in your work? Here's what we're going to do. This is a bit unusual for Steve and I. We're going to have relatively large breakout rooms. We're going to break the group into two. One group is going to stay here with me, and one group is going to go to the breakout room and be with Steve. And the invitation is to spend 10 minutes or so talking about how you might use this in your work and asking questions in the group.
Equally, Judy, it's about when you would not use it. This is not for every single. If I find someone in the street looking to find their way, I'm not going to say, "What would you like to have happen?" Because they would look at me like I was certifiable lunatic, and they'd be right, because that's a "how can I help you" situation. But there are places where the invitation for us to think, consider, to move out of hierarchy, to learn, to be curious, to create a sense of being listened to and heard, they're the ones that matter. So I guess we're looking for the ticks and crosses on when this might be useful.
Okay, I'm going to open a breakout. Steve, you go to the breakout when it comes up.
Yep.
And the rest of you stay with me. And let's see what happens. Here we go. So how might this be useful in your work? What's striking you? Fran?
I'm imagining a couple ways it could be useful for my work. One is my work is architecture, and I think my mind is just spinning about in many ways. I mean, the one way is talking to clients and user groups to find out what they want, especially if they want something really out of the world. Like I do school projects, and like a music teacher, they want a whole music suite with practice, this whole thing, and they're not going to be able to get it. But to ask them what is sort of the essence of what you need to teach. If you're not going to have this whole big thing, but what do you really need? That's one thing. Also, communicating with teams, within teams. Also, one thing I'm also very interested in is making the workplace better for people who are neurodivergent. And I think a lot of this clean language could be helpful to that.
Mm. On that one, I can definitely comment that it definitely is, because I know that an organization called Genius Within, which is in the UK, they use a lot of clean language to find out about what neurodivergent individuals need in order to be accommodated in the workplace. And the people who lead that organization say they just couldn't do their job without clean language.
Yeah. And I think I'm imagining it also could be a skill that people in the workplace who are neurodivergent, there's communication differences with how the neurotypical people express themselves, that it would help the neurodivergent people advocate for themselves. Because if they can try to, tease out of people, what are all the nonverbal stuff or the implied things that you're imagining in your mind that the neurodivergent person isn't picking up on, trying to sort of coax out of them more helpful information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Francis, you were going to say something, then let's hear from Matt.
Yes, I think in nursing, everybody is so beat up in nursing in the healthcare field, at least in this country, and mostly, just to be able to stop the defensiveness by letting the person talking being heard, or asking, what would you like to have happen? And I think that would just de-escalate that muscle that all of us in nursing and healthcare seem to have a little bit of, to one degree or another. So that was just one of 5 ways I had thought about it. And that's with peers, with patients, this could be awesome, because patients are used to being, I'm sick and it doesn't matter, I can't do anything about it, so I'm just going to eat more candy because it makes me feel better. Clean language could be awesome.
And I've got some video interviews with a couple of nurses in the UK. This country in your that you were referring to is the US.
Yes.
In the UK, I've got a lovely piece with one of the palliative care nurses who's talking about how she decided to ask a clean language question, not the one we've been playing with today, but the question, what kind of? Every time she heard the word support, and she would ask, what kind of support?
Oh, yeah.
And what she discovered was that the support that people needed was often nothing like what she was imagining.
Oh, I would love to see those. Or that.
Yeah, so that on my YouTube channel, which is the channel is called X-Ray Listening. So let's hear from Matt and then from Katarzyna.
Yeah, so I definitely see some application here for teams, especially teams that are supposed to be high performing, companies, corporations, could be universities as well, to establish and maintain trusting relationships, to quickly establish trust. If I'm sharing my words and I'm hearing my words reflected back and cleanly reflected back, being asked clean questions, and we're doing that as a group, I know that that can really establish trust much more quickly. And then just like the situation that you mentioned with support, how when teams are working together, what does support mean to you? What does support mean to me? I make inferences and assumptions of what that is, but when I cleanly find out what that is, we're able to get to the heart of the matter much more quickly. And then related to better conversations, I actually just came from facilitating the last session of that this morning. I was brought up that you can bring up, and this is especially important for the technology space, where there's a lot of engineers who are male. The predominance are men in software engineering. You can get them to talk about their feelings without talking about their feelings. So, asking cleanly about their state and things like that can actually get them to share and help understand each other's context better and more cleanly and respectfully without ever having to talk about, feelings. So.
Thank you. Yeah, nice. Thanks very much. Katarzyna.
Thank you. I also have a question. So I have an idea because I'm using it for a while on my happy child of being taught by Sharon. And now I'm working with climate coaching and with politicians and with big groups. And I have like plenty of methods. And I was wondering, when there's so much predominance or dominance or power, disempowerment and violence, how could I use it even more in big groups?
Yeah. It does depend on the size of your group, of course. When you're talking big groups, how big is your big groups?
Some of them are like 200 people, some of them are like 30 people.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite ways of using clean language with big groups like that is to get them to ask each other the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's a blog post I wrote only a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about the advantage of just doing, so not the question we've done today, but the questions, what kind of X? And is there anything else about X? There are activities you can set up where, for example, you can get them talking in pairs just for 2 minutes each way and ask them about each other's views, say on the topic under discussion. And as long as people mix up, then suddenly you've got in the course of, so 2 minutes, then swap roles, 2 minutes, and then swap partners, 2 minutes, swap partners, 2 minutes, swap partners. You've learned about 5 other people really fast.
Yeah, I know the idea, Judy. I'm doing this way because you make it beautifully. However, when you have opposition parties, I'm in Germany, so the openness to discuss it with others.
Yeah, and of course,
But I take it.
there's a richness in the whole facilitation of really. I was saying to somebody today that difficult conversations arise when people aren't having the other kind of conversations often enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that is certainly true in most political contexts. It used to be the case that you just got the people together and they would have enough conversations to make something magical happen. But nowadays, everybody's playing to the cameras and it doesn't really work the same way it used to. I'm about to hit the close all rooms button and I want to hear from Daniel because you've been super quiet. I'm going to hit the button. You've got a minute.
No worries. I've been absorbing it. It's been a very interesting session. Thank you for arranging it tonight. The question isn't quite natural to me yet, but I think I'll be able to use it when members of my team don't pick up work. For example, if we're delegating and splitting up work and they're not participating, maybe I can ask, what do they need in order to be able to pick up work? And maybe there's a barrack and inquire after it in a more clean way. I'm sure there's many other use cases, but I'm looking forward to practicing and getting it wrong first.
Yeah, and once again, get them asking the questions. And perhaps you could teach them the Better Conversations course that Matt was facilitating earlier today. And the more they ask, the richer the experience they have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I might check that out. It sounds interesting.
And 3, 2, 1, we're all going to be whooshed. Well, the others are going to be whooshed back into the room any second now. Here they come. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Good conversation on the other side, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just saying to Thobes, we will close on time to respect everybody's time. But Judy, you and I, we've already said if people want to hang around afterwards to pick our brains, ask questions, do other stuff, find out stuff, then we'd be more than happy to stay on.
There's one more essential that needs to be mentioned, which is the experiment. So we would love you to try out asking the question, what would you like to happen, in 3 situations where you would normally ask, or where people might normally ask, how can I help you? And tell us what happens.
It could be 2, it could be 5. We just pick 3, pick your own number.
Now, our experience has been that most people, when they pick these questions up, the first time they try it out in the wild, it feels clunky, it feels awkward, it's not the same way they ordinarily do things, and that's not nice for people. So we invite you to push through, do it once in some low tension situation, like in your family or something like that, and then try twice more and let us know what happens.
If you like it, keep going. But we're just really interested. This is the experiment we're going to run with clinical practitioners up and down the country to try and get a good quality cohort of information at some kind of scale. And we realized today that, and this is purely invitational. Don't do it and don't report back on it. It's all completely and utterly fine. There's no obligation at all. But if you do, we'd really like to know what experience you had. And we've got a form that you can fill in and submit, which will help us with the passing of the data later. It will be anonymized. It will be anonymized. People's answers won't be associated with their answer, will they, Judy?
No, we ask for people's email addresses so that we know who's completed the form, but we won't be publishing those names.
And there's no invitation to intimacy in the detail either, to do with clients or anything. Please don't provide anything that would require a firewall around it. It's just how it went for you, not the quality of patient information or anything like that. No.
And we've got about 7 minutes left for questions, comments, anything that anyone would like to ask or share.
Have we given them the form, Judy? Is that, sorry, did I
I've
miss
put
something?
it in the chat. The form is in the chat.
Form is in the chat.
And will also be sent out in an email after this.
Okay.
Comments, questions, observations, curiosities.
Hey, Karen.
And then Stephanie.
Can I ask a quick question? I really enjoyed the when X happens, what would you like to happen? But it felt a little bit like a second question to me. Do you have a really good clean question for that first question where you find out what X is? Like what's brought somebody to you today?
Well, funny you should say that, because I'm currently experimenting with the question. Now, the thing is that there isn't a better first question that's David Grove's clean language question, because the first question always comes from something or somewhere that is somehow contextual. In a therapy context like Sue's, you typically start by basically going, and here you are, what would you like to happen? So you don't have the problem mentioned before you start. You say, and what would you like to happen? And then the person might well mention a problem. Oh, I need help controlling my anger, or whatever it is. And so they give you the problem there. The question I'm currently experimenting with, which is not a clean question at all, but I think works in a bunch of situations, is what caused you to make time for this conversation? Now, it's not a clean question. It's not one of David's, but it's really interesting as a starter, because most people have busy lives. And if you've booked a conversation with somebody, there must be a reason that they said yes.
Your context is, and I'm going to go back to where context is, people have booked conversation. You're inviting people to have conversations with you at the moment to do with our work and where you'd like to go in the world. So that would be the context of someone's booked conversation. They come in and responded to Judy's "I'm open to conversations" message, and they booked time. So that has a context, and that brings me to every interaction has a context. And we can't create a style, a template answer for each context. That is in your hands and your wisdom to look at the context. Like I say, if I saw somebody perhaps looking, lost on a street or in a shop, I'm not going to say, what would you like to have happen? I'm going to say, how can I help you? So your context will be a great guide.
Stephanie.
So many of the groups that I've been working with are 20 and 30-year-olds, and there's a hopelessness, there's just this sense of doom. And so the clean question, I'm wondering if the response will just continue in that sense of overwhelm.
Often, in certain kinds of contexts, this question needs to be asked more than once. So, and when sense of impending doom and overwhelm, what would you like to happen? And you can add a time on the end of it as well. You say, and when impending doom and overwhelm, and it's all going to hell in a handcart, what would you like to happen in this conversation? And they might say, I'd just like to moan about the way of the world. But they might also say, and I'd like whatever they like.
There's a lot of technique outside of the very, very simple basics that we're not going to cover in depth here, Stephanie. But do stay tuned and get hold of some of Judy's free to air work on clean language if you want to read into it a bit more, and then come back and talk to us.
Book. Okay. Could I just ask a question? What if somebody is undecided what they really want? I mean, I was very tempted last week. It was a conversation I had with somebody, and I should have perhaps asked what needs to happen for you to be happy in retirement, for example. He just didn't know. He was a mixture of denial, I felt, and perhaps saying things that he felt I wanted to hear as well. What would I ask?
Depends how much time you've got, Catherine, and the level, the context of your relationship with the other person. One of the great things about the use of David's clean language questions is in in cycle and in with the other questions and wisdom you can bring, they are particularly good at helping other people to get clarity about what they would like to have happen.
Yeah.
That's a particular question set and language set that we can that does exist. We're not going to answer it in 20 seconds, but the short answer is I personally know of no better way to help other people to get clarity about what they think. You can go into metaphor, you can go psychoactive with their metaphor and get them to work stuff out. That's why it's so brilliant for coaching. Depends on the context. Is this a cup of tea with somebody at the church, or is it a friend, partner?
No, this was a business situation.
I'm not, yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm not asking you to disclose. The combination of the questions and the listening is a superb way to bring clarity to other people. That would take a bit more explaining, and I've had Elmo flashed in my face to tell me to stop talking.
Because it is 1:30. Thanks, Catherine. We are willing to stay on for a few minutes longer if there are further questions, but I need to say this is the official end. Thanks ever so much for being here. It's been absolutely awesome seeing everybody. I'm really excited by where some of these conversations could go next. Do stay in touch. I will be adding everybody who isn't already on it to my link letter list on a Friday, so you'll hear lots of updates about different things. And I will email everybody with a link to the recording and with links to the various things we've talked about during today's session. Thank you. It's been brilliant. See you again another time soon.
And we'll stay online for anybody who has more questions.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That's great.
You're very welcome, Sue.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, what's your motivation to be promoting this? I know you said you wanted to promote it with healthcare and government, and I just was wondering.
Better conversations. The course, the better conversations. The motivation is that our purpose in life is to improve the quality of understanding in human discourse. That is our intrinsic motivation. We do not want to train 1 million people. We do want to train a low number of hundreds of people who then go on to train 1 million people. And I can see no better starting point than the extremely well referenced, robust and solid Better Conversations product that's backed up by a foundation that's subsidized by somebody who wants to make a dent in the world. So we've got intrinsic motivation, the ability to work at a financial basis with those who want coaching on that, and then to release them as if it was my right. Assist them to go into the world and do something at a scale that we cannot and will not do on our own. So there is some money in it, but there's a rather excellent product that can just be picked up and used at scale. When that happens, there are hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of people who are curious about the world of work that we have. And okay, long-term game, in my mind, if there's 10,000 or 100,000 people who've got curious about this entry point, a few of them are going to come to us to say, I want more than just the basics.